Before I start, I, a 35-year-old male, need to tell you who I am and what I do for a living. You see, I was a hacker on the private nets for nearly a decade. I'm not necessarily proud of it, and I'll never be. But believe me when I say, the dark web is not a place to mess around. It's no joke. Have you ever heard the saying, curiosity killed the cat? Well, that's exactly what could happen to you on the dark web. Curiosity can get you killed. I, along with other dark web users, have experienced horrific things in our earlier days, all because we were too dumb to mind our own business. We wandered off to a place we weren't welcomed. Needless to say, I learned my lesson quickly. My point is, I regret becoming a hacker, and I highly discourage anyone from following in my footsteps. And also, it's not for the reasons you would expect. I never went to prison because I was caught or anything like that, nor did I get into any trouble with the wrong kinds of people. No, but God, if only it were that simple. Instead, my case is strange and unusual, and far worse than otherwise. So, this is why I will never be a hacker. Not in a million years again. So, now that you're up to pace with who I am, I could tell you about the incident. This took place about a year ago, in September of 2019. I should also add that I had a girlfriend. For the sake of her privacy, I will refer to her as Amanda. We met off the dark web, and before long, we were living together in a small house in the suburbs of Phoenix. And for a while, things seemed like they were perfect. That was until this happened. This story does not start off for the faint of heart. In fact, what happened on that night made me think twice about living, and made me consider slitting my wrist. This all started off like any other night. Me and my girlfriend cuddled together in our warm beds, slowly falling asleep. Just as I was on the brink of shutting my eyes and having a good night's rest, Amanda stood up and walked out of her room. I assumed she was getting a glass of water, so I continued on with my slumber. Suddenly, I was startled awake when I heard a window shatter. From down the hall, I heard Amanda scream her lungs out in terror. As soon as the screaming started, it stopped. I heard something being dragged out of our house. I immediately jumped out of bed and ran into the door, stumbling out of my room. I looked around for her, but by the time I was on the phone dialing 911, it was already too late. I was interviewed in the morning under the condition that I would be investigated. I was the main suspect, since I was one of the few people who knew Amanda on a personal level. I still remember when I was taken to the interrogation room, and I could hardly believe the earlier events. I was still in shock. Eventually, after hours of interrogation, I was let go. Now, I won't get into all the details, but to put it short, my neighbor's security camera saved me from being blamed for her kidnapping. The security footage showed a black SUV with tinted windows driving up to our house. The doors opened to reveal 3 burly men carrying duct tape, presumably to cut off the screams. They broke in through one of the windows, having a look of malice plastered on their faces. And then the screams. Oh God, the screams. They were bone-chilling. It made me shudder, forcing me to think of the events of so long ago. Once the police got a hold of the footage, I was no longer their main target, although I was kept a close eye on since I could have easily hired someone to kidnap her. Of course, I didn't tell them this. It stayed like that for nearly 2 years. No lead, no evidence, no confessions. The case was cold. I told myself I would recover, and my mourning and despair would soon turn into memories, sad ones at that. that I would soon be a better person and overcome that stage, and I really tried to make that a reality. Instead, life took a turn for the worst. At the best of times, I barely managed to stay sober enough through all that tequila to do my once exciting, now miserable job. As I said, things were going downhill. I was spending the thousands I had made in the past at an alarming rate. My life was ruined. Things would never be the same after Amanda's kidnapping and presumed death, and I knew it. And you may think it couldn't get any worse. That's exactly what I would have thought if I were you back then. But it turns out, things could get much worse. This is why I'm typing this now. I'm next. Or maybe it's for the best. I awoke like any day, my messy hair and sunken eyes making me look like a zombie. I groggily walked over to my monitor, already expecting the usual day's hassle. I was never the biggest of fans on waking up early in the video, but I suppose as an adult, you have to make sacrifices so you could get that satisfying paycheck every month. As I booted up my monitor, I noticed an email had been sent to me. Now, I don't have many subscriptions, nor do I usually get many emails, so this was out of the ordinary. So, instinctively, I clicked on it. But this action only served to confuse me even more. PROJECTdeath.exe. I slowly read off my laptop screen. What was even stranger is that it had no sender's address. I was a bit pissed since this was probably some stupid junk mail, but more so confused. And so I made what will forever stay the worst decision of my life. I clicked on it. Out of all the things I could have done, delete it, forget about it, and pretend that it never existed, I chose to satisfy my curiosity over saving my sanity and not having to endure that pain. It opened to a blank page. At least it seemed like that at first. I stared at it for a minute, not really knowing what to do. Then, just as I was about to close it, text appeared in the middle of the page. As I've said one too many times, this happened a year ago, so obviously I can't remember everything, but I'll attempt to transcribe the text down below. What is Project Death? Experiment.98, also known as Project Death, is an experiment meant to test the limits of the human body to death. It has been funded by various organizations for further research and future developments. The participants have been carefully picked, their backgrounds have been reviewed, and said participants' physical and mental state has been overviewed beforehand. How does it work? Our experiment takes place in our advanced facility in the secluded Nevada desert, where the information and tapes cannot be uncovered and revealed. In the extremely unlikely case the information is breached, via tech or any other methods, the whistleblower will be taken care of immediately. Any of his or her family members and/or close friends will be informed of an alternative account of the disappearance of said. Project Death's experiments are filmed on 1080p videotape. The videotapes are designed so only the administration and other high ranks can view it. There are 7 tapes in total. Each one contains one part of the experiment. They'll be listed down below. Curiosity was starting to get the best of me. I knew it was most likely some kind of weird joke, but I wanted to investigate. Who was doing this? So, before I could even process what I was doing, I had already scrolled down to find a pair of hyperlinks leading to the supposed tapes. I was half certain it would lead to the all too infamous Rickroll clip, but by that point, I was too far in to turn back. So, I clicked the first link, titled, Tape 1, Pain. As soon as the monitor loaded, all of the alarm bells on my mind were set off. On the screen, there were two men, one bald, the other tall and muscular. The taller of the bunch seemed to be holding a syringe of sorts. My fingers immediately shot up to the mouse, on the intention that I would pause the video. But as I scrolled around, I realized I couldn't pause it. Already getting more desperate and ticked at the idea, I tried shutting off my laptop. That served to do nothing as the video resumed. I laid back on my chair, not knowing what to do. Was I infected with a virus? Was something seriously wrong with my monitor? I relaxed, already entertaining the idea of watching the entire video through. So in a who cares sort of mood, I got a bottle of Gatorade next to my monitor and watched closely. After a minute of staring, a gurney was seen entering the screen. I looked closer only to see a body. It was perfectly fine, alive, but for some reason it started messing with my nerves. The man with the syringe brought it up and plunged it into the patient's bicep. Without warning, the patient's eyes flew open, and he suddenly started to look around frantically. "Where am I? Back off, creeps," he said in a desperate voice. Without response, the patient's body suddenly starts convulsing. He started screaming in what I could only describe as horror on a level I was naive to. The men didn't even flinch as they walked out of frame. I was horrified at this point. The realization dawned on me that this might have been more than just a joke. This was real. For some reason which I still cannot explain to this day, I decided to watch the second tape. I seriously don't know why I did that. Maybe I was hoping that the second tape would reveal it was some sick joke. Alas, I watched the tape labeled Tape 2, Solitude. Now, the title of this tape really set it apart from the others. The other tapes were obvious deaths, like burning, or anything else that whichever sick pervert who created this decided to add. However, this tape started off differently from the first tape. It showed a badly beaten woman sobbing while strapped down to a chair. She was a middle-aged blonde woman and looked rather pretty. It was such a shame to treat her like that. But eventually, things would get even worse. The video sped up, making every passing real-world minute down to less than a second. I watched intently as the time sped up even more, the woman slowly deteriorating and more disheveled as time went on. After what must have been a huge amount of time, a mechanism that was meant to strap her down was intentionally broken loose by one of the men, now setting the woman free. Me, expecting her to fight for her life and run out of there as soon as possible, was already intrigued by the idea that these psychos would get justice for what they did. Instead, that never happened. The woman started banging her head on the nearest wall. Every time her head would hit the concrete, I would hear a crunch. She kept on hitting her head on the wall just like some kind of lunatic out of an insane asylum. I nearly threw up when she had finished the job. Immediately, I turned away and shuddered. Was that real? What the heck was this person's problem? I kept asking myself the same question. Already disgusted, I plugged out its power source, finally putting it to rest once and for all. I don't know what changed me after that. Maybe it was the events that played out so recently, or maybe it was due to realizing how vulnerable I actually am. But after all that, I never want to go back on a computer ever again. So, that was all about a year ago. I had all but forgotten about it by this point. Well, I still remembered it. But it was those things always at the back of your mind. And thinking back on it always makes me wonder what else is on those other tapes. But I always stop myself from watching them when I remind myself what the first two tapes had showed. I can't even imagine what the third or fourth tape would contain. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I've been seeing these black vehicles stopping outside my house and just staying there. I don't know what freaks me out more. The fact that these people are obviously tracking my every move, or the fact that yesterday I received a text from an unknown number saying, "You're next."